All right, we are now recording. This is our fourth quick tip session. My name is Jen Baker, and I am the district behaviorist here in Benicia Unified. We have one participant here with us live, and the rest of you watching this are watching in the comfort of your own homes. But we are doing these quick tip sessions every Monday. It'll be one little piece, one little strategy. They do tend to build on each other, but I'll show you the link to the YouTube after we get started. So today what we'll be talking about is a very simple preventative strategy called pre-correction. But those of you that have come before know that I always start with this slide because this is just the theme right now for parents everywhere. Working, parenting, and teaching are three different jobs that cannot be done at the same time. It is not hard because you're doing it wrong. It's hard because it's too much. Do the best you can. And when at some point you have to pick, because at some point you will, choose connection. And that's by Dr. Emily King. So the part of the reason that I'm putting these quick tip sessions together is parents like no other time before, like it's busy enough being a parent. And now you're a parent, and a lot of you are also working, and you're also responsible for organizing your kids and having them at home doing their school. And it's just crazy making for a lot of people. So I'm literally making up things to do anything I can to support. And we'll talk about more supports at the end if any of you are interested. So just a couple of quick acknowledgements. Anything good you hear me say is probably not an original idea. Most of it is from what we call positive behavior interventions and supports, which I'll talk about in a minute, but these are a few of the organizations that have taught me and that I've borrowed materials from, including a lot of the slides that you'll see today. Couple quick expectations for those of you that might join us for future sessions. You can join, and if you're concerned about being recorded and on the YouTube channel, you can turn off your camera, you can mute yourself, you can change your name if you have privacy concerns. I do encourage people that are here live to break in at any time if you have a question. And the last one I like to say is that everything that I present on has an evidence base, means that it's not just random something that someone made up, that it's actually researched, but not just researched in a lab, also tried and tested in schools and homes. But that being said, not everything works for every kid, not everything works for every family. So if it's not a fit for you, try a different session. So today we're going to do a quick review of the previous sessions. I'm going to talk about what PBIS is and how it applies to helping parents in the home. We're going to talk about a couple of the foundational practices that we've talked about in previous sessions, and then today we'll talk about pre-correction. So positive behavior interventions and supports. Basically, the point of PBIS in our schools is to make our schools effective and equitable learning environments for all students, regardless of age, disability, ethnicity, anything. All means all. And we want to build relationships and make everybody feel a part of the culture. And how we do that is we organize our supports and services to promote positive behavior. And so basically, PBIS isn't a curriculum or an intervention. It is a framework to help schools organize their supports. And you might see similarities across sites, but each school site has a team of people that rotates through, and they adapt things using the PBIS framework to make it fit the culture of their school. The bottom line in PBIS and in everything that we'll be talking about in these sessions, rather than focusing on what we want our kids to stop doing, our schools define and teach the behaviors and expectations that we want to see. So a big part of this is each school has 3 to 5 values, positively stated, easy to remember expectations that align with the kind of climate that they want. for students to know the expectations. We can't just post them on the wall. So we have assemblies and lessons, and staff teach the expectations and reinforce them throughout the year. And then I also like to throw in too, so there's no misconception, while the emphasis is on teaching and promoting positive behavior, it doesn't mean that there isn't discipline or consequences, because kids need limits as well. But we want to make sure that all disciplinary policies include clearly defined behaviors and clearly defined policies and procedures, so that consequences are applied consistently and fairly by all school staff. Just a couple of quick pictures. So here's Benicia Middle and High School. These are their expectations. And then these are the 4 elementary expectations. So you see there's some overlap, like pretty much everybody always has respect, but some have kind, some have safe, and it's up to each school site, as it will be in your home, to decide what your family values are. So how you use the PBIS framework at home, it helps parents create and maintain a safe, structured, and consistent home environment. Like I said before, the underpinning of it is it strengthens adult and child relationships. It benefits kids by having us focus and teach on positive behaviors and building life skills. And then the part that's really, this is kind of a unique opportunity to really educate parents about PBIS, because we know everything is more effective when kids and teens have consistency between the home and school environment. So we have this really unique opportunity for parents to learn some of the processes and language that we use in the school setting. So just a quick review, our previous settings, in general, how we support positive behaviors. We have our setup, or our foundational skills. So our first session was on establishing routines and creating a schedule. It sounds ridiculously simplistic, but particularly in times like this, where everything is topsy-turvy, establishing those routines and creating a schedule are really critical. We talked about developing an expectation matrix with your family that outlines the different routines and what the expectations are. And then last week we moved into teaching and reinforcing, and we did a session on behavior-specific praise. Again, another one of those simple strategies that it seems like, how could this be so effective? But when used in conjunction with everything else, it really is. And then today we'll move into pre-correction. And I did want to point out, we do now have the sessions posted on our district YouTube channel. I'll make you aware of the link at the end. So just a quick review. So our first setup, this would be an example for both elementary and secondary home routines or schedules. In this example, we don't have times. Some families prefer to have times. Some families feel that the times are too limiting. Some have a hybrid, particularly for, we find that typically at schools, we have a bell schedule. So it may make sense, like you see here, where it has in the elementary routine example on the left, the structured learning time, which would be Zoom sessions. You may want to include times for the academic times, because there's no wiggle room there. They're at specific times. Lack of routine for any of us wears on us. Vacations are really fun, but you know what it feels like when we get out of routine and you say, I can't wait to get back to like regular life and routine. And so no matter your situation, COVID has definitely changed routines for all of us. And without a schedule, we can expect that inappropriate behaviors in both adults and kids are going to increase. So a schedule is a really good place to start, and it creates a feeling of safety, believe it or not. This is a family matrix. I'm just going to show it quickly, but along with your family schedule, the next step is to think about what your child or your teenagers need to know to successfully engage in each of the activities on the schedule. So an expectation matrix, we have these posted in our schools, and it serves as a visual reminder. You may have seen these around the campuses, because we tend to post them in some of the more, there's ones in the classroom, but we also have them in the common areas around the school, typically classroom, hallway, cafeteria. And we use our school expectations. So you can see along the left-hand side, these are just some generic ones. Be respectful, be responsible, and give your best effort. Those are the overlying values. And sorry, the overarching values. And then settings or activities across the top. This is an example for the home. So morning routine, exercise time, leisure time, academic time, meal time, technology time, and bedtime. But this can be individualized for your family. But you'll see, just to give one example, so I have it circled, be responsible, what that looks like during the morning routine. Clean your area once you wake up, get out of bed at the scheduled time, and give each other space. So what we do is we take the overarching expectation, we take the routine, and we do a couple of clearly stated, positively stated behaviors of what we expect to see. Clear written expectations support children's and teenagers, not just in having better behavior, but in being more independent. And it helps us prioritize and really establish the values for what we want things to look like in our home. So enough on that. Here's one, this is just a sample for a high school. And you can see the wording is a little more mature, but it's the idea is the same. So behavior specific praise, once we have our schedule and routine, once we have our family matrix, the next thing is to notice when people get it right. And so it's really important that we focus on positive behaviors and interactions. And behavior specific praise is one of the most powerful behavior change tools that we have. There's some great videos that talk about some of the research behind it, but it's not just for kids, it's in marriages, it's in high powered work environments. Behavior specific praise and the ratio of positive to corrective feedback is really critical and really effective. It decreases inappropriate behavior, reduces the need for correction, it makes people feel better and enhances self-esteem and helps kids and teenagers build self-control. And the best part of it is you will feel a heck of a lot better at the end of the day if you've been noticing and reinforcing the appropriate behavior instead of playing whack-a-mole and trying to decrease the problem behavior. Now, easier said than done, because a lot of us, when it's going as it should, we can take a breath for a minute. But it's easier to just focus on the negative, but it feels really lousy at the end of the day when we've been nitpicking everything. I have a video about what behavior specific praise looks like, but I think I'm going to skip it because we have a lot of videos on pre-correction. But this is in the presentation from last week if you're interested. All right, so pre-correction. So in general, how to support positive behaviors. I'm going to say it again, our foundational skills, establish routines and create a schedule. Develop a matrix for your family, which outlines the values and the expectations for different routines. Use behavior specific praise, and now pre-correction. So what is a pre-correction? So this shows our ABC contingency. The B right in the middle is whatever the behavior is. The antecedent is what happens before. The consequence is what happens after. Good, bad, or otherwise. It's a little confusing that behaviorists use the term consequence, but we won't get into that right now. So consequences, good, bad, or anything. So basically a pre-correction identifies predictable times where you might have problems and then provides support, prompting, and reinforcement very often before there's even a problem. So you provide the support and the prompt, and then you reinforce when they get it right. So the idea, it's basically pre-correction is a fancy word for reminders, and reminders can be verbal, visual, or gestural. The idea is that you do the reminding immediately before you're expecting a problem. So the difference between, so pre-correction is really simple, but the idea is you want to get ahead of the problem behavior. You want to give the support before you have the problem. To use it, it's important to understand the behaviors and under the circumstances under which the problems may occur. So I'll give a school example. So for example, if Students, or a student in particular, generally calls out of turn when the teacher asks a question to everybody. What the teacher might do to use a pre-correction is to state, remember everyone, please raise your hand when you want to speak. And then she asks for a question. So the teacher knows that asking a question is an antecedent for one kid or many kids to call out. So she gives a prompt, remember to raise your hand, before she asks the question. And thereby she lowers the chances of the target behavior occurring. And then the next step involves identifying what you want them to do instead, raise their hand, and then to make sure that we reinforce and acknowledge when people actually do raise their hand. Sometimes in a classroom, you tend to give your attention to the kid that's calling out and tell them that they need to raise their hand. But if that kid's doing it just to get acknowledgement or attention, they got it, even though it was negative attention. Or even worse, to say you need to raise your hand, but then allow them to answer. And so we're saying you need to raise your hand, but our behavior is not telling them that. Our behavior is giving them attention and allowing them to answer. So basically a pre-correction is paying it, rather than walking into the same situations again and again, we look at the situations that make us nuts and we figure out what it is that we want instead. And then rather than waiting for it to blow up, we anticipate and we get in front of it by giving a reminder of specifically what's expected, as opposed to waiting for a problem and then trying to do it. Now, pre-correction obviously is not going to eliminate all behaviors. Obviously, sometimes problems are still going to happen, and we'll talk about discipline and behavior correction in a future episode. But pre-correction can decrease a lot of it. So now I'm going to show several videos that are really good examples of all different ages, teachers using teaching, reminding, pre-correction, reinforcement, kind of all of it together. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any videos of parents using the technique because a lot of PBIS is in the schools, although it does apply to the home. Most of the videos and things that I found, or all of the ones that were good, were school. So we'll talk a little bit about how to adjust it to the home, but these are some school examples of pre-correction. So this is a kindergarten class. This is about 3 minutes long, but you'll see the teacher review expectations. She gives they're little kids, so she gives them the chance to kind of practice and role play. She checks to make sure they understand, and she gives pre-corrections or reminders. So here's our first one.
Okay, boys and girls, I turned the lights off because it was getting a little noisy. What should it sound like when we're doing centers, when we're doing our math centers? Who can tell me? Amanda? Quiet. Can you whisper to your partner? Yes. Can you talk in a big voice to your partner? All right. Show me what it should look like and sound like when I turn the lights back on. Much better. Much better. We have gym this afternoon, snack, and you'll go home and you'll have playtime at home today. We're going to be too busy in here to fit our playtime in. All righty, everybody. Where do your hands belong when you're in your reading group? Everybody?
In your lap.
In your lap. Where do your feet belong during your reading group?
On the floor.
On the floor. Where do your eyes belong?
On the book.
On the book. Where does your back belong?
On the chair.
So it should look like sitting with your feet on the floor, your hands in your lap, and your back on the chair. And it should sound like kids saying the words when there are signals and saying the sounds when there are signals. Got it?
Got it.
Thumbs up if you can do it today. All righty, take your hand up. Give yourself a big pat on the back for working so hard this morning. Hands down. If you are in the yellow group, tiptoe back and sit down for reading. Oh, good, good. If you're in the blue group, line up at the door. Would you please do that? Get ready. The girl can not
teach me to run.
Nice and smooth. Next sentence.
I can run.
I can run.
Ha ha.
Ha ha. Listen carefully. Would you like to do I read a word, you read a word? Or would you like to read with a partner? What would you like to do? Patan?
Yeah.
Like the red group is starting. So when you read with a partner, what can we do to make sure we don't interrupt them? What can we do to make sure we don't interrupt them? Mustafa, what can we do? Make sure you whisper. Make sure you whisper. Here's what I need. Patan and Luce Anthony, right on the floor over there. Mustafa and Lala, right on the floor here.
So there was an example of a kindergarten class, and you saw the clarification of expectations, the using a schedule, the practicing, the thumbs up if you can understand me, all of it. So now we're going to shift. We're going to do older students, but these are students with mild disabilities. It is a high school. And this one's only about 30 seconds, but you'll see the same thing where communicating expectations and then pre-correction and prompting, both for the whole class and for one student in particular.
It looks like it's about time for lunch. I want to remind you of our expectations in the hallway. You need to walk to the lunchroom quietly. Go ahead and put your things away, and you can head to the lunchroom. Michael? You put your notebook away and get out your board. I just want to remind you, expectations in the hallway are to walk quietly. Can you point to the one walking quietly? Great job. Go ahead and go to the lunchroom.
So that was a quick one, but you saw her give a pre-correction to the entire class about walking quietly, as well as meeting quickly one-on-one with a student to review again, walking quietly. Oops. Let's go to the next one. Okay, this one is also pre-correction, as well as specific praise and all kinds of good stuff, but this is a general education high school class. So the pre-correction is super, super quick. So see if you can spot it.
Okay, so that's what a cliche is. So here's what we're gonna do next. I'd like you guys to work on the big sentence we were talking about. One complete sentence that uses a cliche. So when you want to use a cliche, you can always look up at the board of the things you've been doing or pick one of your own. So who has one that they'd like to use this? Yeah.
How about quiet as a mouse?
Quiet as a mouse is perfect. That's a cliche. Now, if you can't think of one of your own, you could always look up at the board. Or Rose, which one of these might you pick on yours? Hard as a rock. That's a good one. Okay, great. Get out that paper and let's go.
All right, so in this one, we only have one participant live, so I'm not going to put her on the spot. But the pre-correction there, he does it twice, he does it very quickly. So as not to call on someone and have them not know the answer or not be ready, before he starts the whole thing, he says, remember, you can look at the board or you can pick one of your own. And again, these are typical high school students, so it happens very quickly. You're not going to use the same language, tone, and visuals that you would use with your itty bitties. You make it age appropriate. And then he also, before he calls on one student, gives a reminder, if you can't think of one, you can look up at the board. So he has things up there and he's reminding people that they can use that if they get stuck. All right, so let's go to another one.
Okay.
Okay, these are fifth graders. This one's a little longer. It's about 3 minutes, but it's a really good example of a teacher doing a lot of pre-correction and reminders before transitions. And I don't care if you're in the home or the school, transitioning between activities is typically a source of a lot of wasted time and a lot of behavior issues. So you can see how she plans for transitions in this classroom. And again, this one's about 3 minutes, so it's a little longer.
Board eraser, can you find your board eraser?
Cruz, so I need a. Cruz, there he is, okay. Let's do this in 10 seconds. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. I just need your attention. Eyes up at the front. I want to explain the stations and then we may go, right? Is that what you put for what you know though? No, okay. Freeze, don't move yet. All right, 99% of you did really good this round in the station. Every group completed exactly what I needed you to complete. All right, clean up your station, make sure it's nice and organized, and go back to your own seat. One person can take the thesaurus back, and the other person can take it back, and then the other one can take care of this. Okay, so now we need to go to RIF. So the rule for RIF, we haven't been to RIF for a while. When you get in the hallway, you have to be patient because we may have to wait before I can seat you. I don't know if they're going to talk to you. And then how do I choose people to get RIF books? Christina. By who's sitting there quietly. So if you're sitting there for 10 minutes and you're still antsy, well, then I don't know if you're going to get a chance to get a book. All right, let's see which table's ready to line up. You may go. Hector's table line up first. Mark, Ray, we have referee checking out.
All righty, so that was a really good example of planning for transitions, especially the one where they were going to some kind of like a book fair or a book club or something, and it sounded like not only would they be in the hall with other classes, but they were going to be waiting for maybe an extended period, and they haven't been there for a while. So activity that they don't regularly do, unstructured, and waiting, which are 3 hallmarks for problems. Okay, and then I have the final one. The sound is not good on this one, but it's such a good example of adjusting to your audience, because a lot of times, and I actually got some feedback from parents that the parent webpage was too focused on little kids in elementary, which is fair. So I've adjusted that, and I'm really trying to give examples that show a broad range of how to use these strategies. And I put some more resources on the website so it's not so elementary focused. So the sound isn't good here, but this is another, again, very good example of managing behaviors in a preventative and supportive way, and pre-correction. So here we go.
And we remember our expectation, right? Okay, now remember, we're talking about our test and we have to be safe. Wait, hold on 1 minute. You have to be safe, right? Right? You have to be safe. Right, and we have to make sure we're doing our best on our work, correctly? Right, and also, guys, when we are taking the test, there's absolutely no talking. That means voices are off. Can we do a sample of voices being off? I don't want to hear a sound, okay? Next, you need to stand your seat. If you need my attention, you need to do what? You need to do what? Can I see an example? Raise your hand. No. Hey, Ms. Williams, I need you slightly raise your hand. Okay, good job. Also, guys, last thing, do your own work. I do not want you looking at her paper. Not today anyway, okay? No cheating, guys. We want to make sure you're using your own mind. That's why you're talking here. I know you probably was asking a question about the test. So can ask your questions before, but when we get the test, no talk. Does anybody have any questions? Sure? Okay, what's one of our expectations during test taking? Being silent, thank you for raising your hand. Good job. Raise your hand when you have a question. Excellent. Do your own work. Okay, one more. Stay in your seat. You guys got it. So let me give you a minute. And remember, when we're in our small groups in about a minute or so, we're going to always remember our PBIS expectations. To be safe, that means we're going to keep our hands and our feet and eyes to ourselves. And also to stay in our small group area. Don't go wandering around, okay? Stay focused to our small groups. Also, we're going to be respectful. We're going to listen. We're going to open up our ears to everybody in the group because everyone has an opinion. Then we're going to make sure we use our indoor voices. We know our indoor voices are not loud, but not quiet. Having a conversation. Very good. Also to be responsible. Contribute to the group. Don't let one person all the talk. Okay? Everyone has great ideas. And also put away all materials and work on the things that we're working on in the group. Don't bring in your iPod, your iPhone, whatever. Keep everything in your system, your writing paper, on your desk, what we're going to be working on. And last but not least, when I tell you to clean up, put everything away, and we're going to get back to this of what we're going to do in the next lesson. Does everybody understand?
All righty. So again, the reason I really liked this, a couple of things. And again, it's about adjusting how you deliver things depending on your audience, depending on the age, depending on how you communicate with your kids. You don't need to act artificial or do it in a way that's unnatural to you. You adapt it to fit what's comfortable. But what she did that I really liked is there was a lot of checking for understanding, not just that kids were listening to her, but the fact that she would kind of quickly ask a couple of questions. Like you notice in the kindergarten class, with little kids, it's best to have them show you. Show me what it means to have a quiet body and then have them try that. Doesn't work so well with teenagers. It's usually better to kind of probe verbally. The other thing that I like is that you can see how her expectations poster was not this big fancy thing. It was on like a big poster that she did with a dry erase marker. So with any of these materials, when it says put things in writing and post it, it can be a whiteboard. It can be fancy. I worked with one parent who used to be a graphic designer, so she made these really fancy posters, and that's awesome if that's your thing. But if it's not, it's just more important that you get it up and get it in writing. So let's move to when parents can use pre-correction. So any routine or activity when you typically see behavior problems. And if you've made a matrix for your home or a couple of matrices for different areas, you're probably already going to have the routines identified where you typically see issues. A couple of ones that I commonly hear from parents, Zoom classes and online learning is the biggest one. But outings or shopping, particularly now that there's different rules and social distancing rules, but even before COVID, going to a grocery store with a little kid was no easy feat. So outings or shopping. Meal times, anything where siblings need to share toys, space, or technology, you might see some behavior problems. That would be a great time to go over the expectations before things kind of spiral out of control. Any kind of a new activity or outing. Any kind of transitions, I talked about those before, especially when you're moving from playtime to work time or playtime to chores or academics or Monday mornings. Who doesn't have a hard time with Monday mornings, getting from weekend mode to weekday mode? Or any routines where kids or teenagers need a lot of reminders. If you find that you're having to follow them around and nag and give a lot of reminders, that's the perfect time to use pre-correction. Getting up, dressed, and ready for the morning Zoom classes is one of the top ones that I hear. Homework or independent work time is another one where parents are doing something else or they're doing their own work, and kids are expected or teenagers are expected to manage and get their own work done. Bedtime is usually a big one, and chores is another one. So why do we want to use pre-correction? It's simple and it's super effective. The only hard part about pre-correction is you need to put a little planning time in advance to identify which are the routines that you're going to focus on. But then once you do, it's just a matter of giving that reminder phrased in simple, positive terms before you actually start the routine or the activity. It prevents a lot of poor choices in behavior in our kids or our teenagers. An emphasis on prevention and teaching versus fighting fires really does create a more positive environment for everybody, not just for the kids, but for us adults that are teaching and reminding instead of nagging and correcting. It allows children and teens to make a connection between upcoming things and their actions and what happens next. And there's a lot of research that shows, in particular, when you use pre-correction with behavior-specific praise, at least in schools, reduced behavior problem and increased academic engagement, which is super, super important. So here's another slide I'm not going to go through. It's a little redundant, but you can come back to it. It's in the handouts that are on the parent webpage. But again, anticipate problems that might be situations that might be problematic. Decide what it is that you want the expected behavior to be. Create a matrix if you can. Praise when they get it right. Check for understanding. These are the keys. So in summary, you want to, again, the foundation, highly recommend you look at routine schedules in a family matrix. Once you do that, moving on to behavior-specific praise when kids and teenagers and adults meet the expectations, and using pre-correction before those settings to kind of head things off. And I always put on here too, being patient with yourself, because even if this stuff sounds really good as you sit here watching a video, it's a whole different thing to try to be using a new skill. So just be patient with yourself. It takes time to change our own behavior. And then if you want to learn more, so this is a screenshot of our webpage. I think most parents have it by now. If you don't, you can email me at jenbaker@venetianunified.org. And again, it's Jen Baker, not J Baker. But I can reshare the link with you. It's been sent out a couple of different times in emails from the district, but the way that it works is there are different columns. There are resources organized by columns. So let's see, how to stop yelling at your kids is one column. And then you can scroll up and down, and there's video links and resources and all kinds of things. So it's kind of a lot to look at first, but it really is pretty intuitive once you start playing around with it. You can either go right to left or up and down, and it has everything organized, and you can just click on things. The other thing I like to mention is the office hours. These are free 30-minute consults with me. If you go to the parent webpage, there is an office hours flyer that has a link to a Google form to sign up. And it's a 30-minute consult. So if you need help navigating the webpage, or you have questions about one of these presentations, or if you want to talk specifically about, okay, here's what's going on with my kid or my teenager right now, I need help with X, Y, or Z, I can gather a little information and then guide you to the resources that I think would be the most helpful to start with. And then the final one, like I said, is all of these are now recorded and posted on our district YouTube channel. So thank you to our technology department, specifically Michael Sharif, who is uploading these to YouTube for me. So I think that's about it for now. And I hope to see all of you soon. Bye for now.